Support for Live in 225 is provided in part by the Grimm Family Center for Organic Production and Research at Cal Poly. For more information or to support the center, please visit organic.calpoly.edu. That's organic.calpoly.edu for the Grimm Family Center for Organic Production and Research at Cal Poly. Support for Live in 225 is provided in part by AgCom Central. Visit AgCom Central on twitch.tv/AgCom Central or on our website, agcomcentral.com, where you can follow our social media. That's twitch.tv/AGCOMM Central for AgCom Central. Support for Live in 225 is provided in part by the Department of Agricultural Education and Communication at Cal Poly. Visit aged.calpoly.edu to register for our programs or to show your support. That's aged.calpoly.edu for the Department of Agricultural Education and Communication at Cal Poly.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Live in 225 podcast. This is Season 1, Episode 6 of our podcast.
Advanced.
Yeah, and we are going to be talking about bugging in organic production. We're here with our panelists today. We have Tegan, who is our production kind of like leader for this episode and is going to be sitting in on this podcast and just like sharing her expertise on this episode. Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
We have Dr. Grisham, as always, who is in charge of the Grimm Family Center for Organic Production and Research at Cal Poly. Good morning. Nice to have you back.
Always great to be here.
And we have Dr. Mike, who is our advisor and professor for this class, who is the expert on all things ag comms. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Nice to be here again. Episode 6, huh?
Yeah, episode 6.
We're pushing through really good.
Yeah.
And our special guest today?
And our special guest today on Zoom joining us is David Bright, the Vice President of Marketing for Grimmway Farms. Nice to have you on the guest panel today. Thank you so much for joining.
Good morning. Pleasure to be here.
All right.
Yeah. So the importance of the episode today is to identify the practices that prevent harmful bugs that show up in organic products, talking about common bugs found in organic operations, and something called beneficial bugs, which can also be referred to as natural pesticides in the ag industry. So we're just going to be discussing all bugs all the time, and it's going to be a great episode. So let's just kick it off with...
Can I start today?
Yeah, you can start.
Yeah, I just want to say last quarter, this is good context for David as well. Last quarter we did, Matt, invested in the class, and we did some really, really good work on understanding the difference between beneficial bugs and harmful bugs, and sort of like the concept of the SEAL Team 6 of bugs. And I found that to be so intriguing. And we had the students do some TikToks and stuff. And what came out of that is that, the students recognize that the consumers are so fickle sometimes. When they see like a small bug on their food, they get so intense about it sometimes. Now, I'm not saying that, if you find a bug in like your soup at a restaurant, like that's different. Or if you find a bug in your salad at a restaurant, I think that's something different than you bought a fresh produce. It's considered organic. It's probably straight from the field. There are probably going to be some remnants of bugs on that. Isn't that like fair, Matt?
Yeah, I'd say that's really fair. And, especially as we move towards organic production practices, we rely on different practices to grow our produce. And so as our host was alluding to, so we do use some natural pesticides in organic production. So those would be, things that are typically living organisms. So things that, sort of like cultured bacteria that attack certain bugs. There's some plant extracts and things like that we'll use to keep pest insects out of our produce. But really, the sort of go-to pest management for certified organic production is typically biological control, which involves trying to maintain as part of your organic production system a vibrant community of predator and parasite insects that attack the insects that we don't want to find on our produce and that cause farmers a lot of problems in terms of maintaining quality and yield. But of course the trade-off is you're you're upregulating these insects in the system, and they're going to get through. Some of them are going to get through the very fastidious washing and cleaning processes that our modern produce, goes through. And so this is, David, I think, can probably speak towards the consumer side of this and the problems that producers like Grimmway face in terms of trying to do the right thing, using biological control, using very light pest management practices that avoid using the pesticides that consumers don't want on their organic produce. But the trade-off is that sometimes these things get through. So maybe David, you can comment on that on the marketing side. I mean, what's your experience in terms of buyers and consumers and
bugs?
and bugs.
Yeah, it is a very difficult balance. And, what I have found, and I am a marketer and an analyst, I'm certainly not a farmer, and I will be straight out and just tell you that I have a very cursory knowledge of farming and the strategy and tactics that are employed to keep insects and pests out of the field. The key strategy is to stay on top of what's going on in the field, identify things very early on, because if it gets to be too big of an infestation, there really are not effective tools to go out there once the bugs have really taken hold within a particular field. I mean, at that point, it's so sad because we'll have really beautiful looking produce out there, but we just can't harvest it because it's infested with aphids or other types of insects. And there really is not an effective means of getting it out there. So it's a matter of our people being out in the fields, being very proactive, taking a look at what's out there and figuring out early on what may be coming and what we can do to prevent infestation of insects in the field. On the consumer side, and it was very interesting back in November, the woman that we have that runs our consumer center and that takes all the calls, and I have appreciated her my entire time here, and I've always appreciated the people that run the consumer center. It's a very difficult job. It takes a very special type of person. Unfortunately, she had to go on a leave. So it was kind of up to me to start taking the calls, responding to consumers, and a very eye-opening experience as to what consumers actually expect and the type of things they don't like, and really what their expectations are for fresh produce in general. So I field questions on organic produce, on conventionally grown carrots that we sell, and there really is an expectation of perfection out there, and that everything really needs to be perfect, and consumers get upset when something isn't quite right. So our job in the consumer center is to listen to what their concerns are, explain to them what may have happened, and make sure that they're taken care of and they feel like they're made whole for an experience that wasn't exactly what they were looking for. And insects are quite often part of this, where an insect is found in a particular product, and this may be in a whole product, it could be in a product in a bag as well. And I mean, it's difficult sometimes for the consumers to understand that this is not made in a factory. It's actually made outdoors. It's made outdoors in the sun. And it's, sometimes an insect will get in and they don't like it. But, I think after giving them an explanation, I think they have a better understanding of what the process is like and what to expect.
That's great. Yeah, because it's been so interesting for me talking with growers and pest control advisors and marketers in the organic industry, and what an issue some of this is. And there's such a paradox, right? Because when we do, you brought it up, I think, really well. When we move towards organic production practices, the goal is to minimize the types of interventions that we commonly use in conventional practices, which, basically a use of a lot of pesticides. And there are powerful tools out there for conventional growers that can, respond to problems as they grow. So in an organic system, it really is, how do we maintain balance, and how do we stay, one step ahead of where we think things are going, so we can maintain profitability and quality and, in a good product. But the weird paradox in all of that strikes me is, as you move towards more of a, ecologically, biologically based system, you're going to have more critters in it. right? I mean, because you said it perfectly. You're not producing these vegetables in a factory. They're being produced outdoors, and there's all kinds of stuff outdoors. And when we're trying to manage aphids and caterpillars and the things that typically damage our produce, we're going to see more of the insects that essentially keep those critters at bay. And so I really view that as such a major educational opportunity to help consumers see the nuance and complexities that go into producing the produce that they enjoy. And especially with organics, it's from my perspective, it's like, okay, you've got the USDA certified seal on there that tells you that this grower didn't use synthetic pesticides. But if you get the occasional aphid, or if you get the occasional ladybird larvae or predator insect on there, that's really a further indication that they didn't use synthetic pesticides, because if they did, those critters wouldn't be there.
Exactly.
Period.
I just wanted to divert this conversation. You're talking about beneficial bugs, and we actually have a video that some of the students have went around campus and conducted. So Tegan, if you wanted to discuss about that a little bit before you play the video, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, so the other day, Melissa and I and one of my group mate, we went on campus, around campus market and stuff, to do man on the street interviews with students about asking them 2 separate questions. So we'll get into the other question later. But our first question was do they know any beneficial bugs for produce, or like organic produce specifically? So we can jump right into that video real quick. And we are here at Campus Market, and we're going to ask a couple people about if they know beneficial bugs for organic produce. Do you know any good bugs for organic produce?
Good bugs?
Yeah.
No.
No?
Maybe ladybugs?
Cool, that's actually one of the right answers.
Okay,
Yeah,
sweet.
thank you. Produce?
I do not.
You don't? Okay,
No.
cool. Thank you.
A bee?
Cool, thank you.
Like beneficials?
Yeah. Yeah.
Persimilis?
I don't even know what that is. Thank you.
They eat 2-spotted spider mites.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah.
You just taught me something. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Not really. I'm trying to think bees would be the only thing I could really think of.
I do not.
No? Okay, cool. Thank you.
Do you?
I do. One of them would be like a ladybug.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, of course. Ladybugs have a good purpose.
All right, just to revisit what was said in the videos, Tegan went out, asked a few people, if they know anything about beneficial bugs, and surprisingly, it was really surprising to see a lot of people said ladybugs, or what's the other one that eats the spider mite?
Well, Persimilis, which is a predator. It's one species of predator mite.
Oh.
Yeah, they use them a lot in the strawberry industry.
I am surprised about that.
Yeah.
That we have some knowledge on campus, and
Yeah.
Tegan learned a thing or two. And
I was very shocked by her answer, because I wasn't expecting a student that I walked up to know, but
I wonder if she works at the Strawberry Center.
she possibly could.
Yeah, they do a lot of research with those.
So I wanted to ask a little bit about ladybugs and their benefits in organic and in the agriculture industry in general. I know that they help with pest control. They eat other insects like asparagus beetle larvae, alfalfa weevils, and a lot of other critters like that. So if you want to talk about that, that would be awesome.
So, when we think about, there's different ways that insects benefit agricultural systems and organic systems. And a few people brought up bees, which is really great. So bees don't provide pest management, but if you're dealing with a crop that fruits and relies on insect pollination, of course, they're vital. You need bees to move pollen around so you get your nice fruit. For organic produce, when we're thinking about leafy greens and brassicas and carrots and things like that, most of those we don't need pollination in the field, so our beneficial insects tend to be things that eat herbivorous insects like aphids or caterpillars. And so ladybugs or ladybird beetles really fall in that category. And the wonderful thing about ladybird beetles is that they reproduce pretty quickly, especially in warmer climates like California. So you'll get adult ladybird beetles that fly in. If they fly into a patch of organic, say, cabbage that has cabbage aphid on it, they're going to lay a lot of eggs, and their larvae are super voracious predators. And they look to me, they look a little bit like an alligator from a distance.
Oh, I have seen those before.
Yeah, so they're black with little orange dots on them. But basically, they're if listeners want to check this out, you can go on YouTube and you can find videos of them eating mites and aphids and even small caterpillars. But they're sort of like a lion or a tiger in the system, right? They're not going to just eat one thing. They'll eat rabbits. A large mammalian predator like a tiger or a mountain lion, they'll eat deer, they'll eat rabbits, they'll eat all kinds of things. It's sort of the same thing, only on a very micro scale.
Yeah.
So they're really great to have in systems. Lacewings are another great example of an important predator. And so in that case, the adults don't actually feed on aphids, whereas ladybird beetles are predatory both as larvae and adults. But they reproduce quite a bit, and they also have really, really just hungry larvae that will feed on other critters. Predatory mites, as the one interviewee mentioned, like the Persimmilus, there's a whole variety of species of those, and they're adapted to different climates and different types of crops. But they largely will feed on other mites, like two-spotted spider mite that was brought up, European red mite. There's a whole variety of mites. But they're very small, so they're even smaller than the ladybird beetle. And then we've got all kinds of other predators and systems. I mean, spiders provide a lot of really important predation in organic systems. You also have things like ground beetles, which will feed on a variety of insects. And the really, a really well-functioning organic production system will typically have a whole suite of these predators, and they operate, some of them feed on the soil, some of them feed on the plant, some of them move in and out of the crops. But again, getting back to that consumer issue, if you're building a system that, provides a really good home for these things, they're gonna make their way through the supply chain.
Exactly.
Because they're actively foraging and, hunting down and killing the aphids and mites and caterpillars and variety of other pests that, our growers are dealing with. And, and really, again, I just keep coming back, Brian, your use of, it's not a factory is such a beautiful metaphor for it. And I would say that, the conventional style of agriculture, and if you've listened to me talk on this podcast, for me, it's never about pitting organic against conventional. We're all growing food. We're all trying to do the best we can. It's just different ways of doing it. And there are different outcomes and trade-offs associated with that. But in a conventional, the typical conventional production system in produce, the idea is to try to minimize all insect life across everything. And that's done with synthetic pesticides. And that's how, if you're going to produce a product where there's absolutely no aphids or predator insects on it at the end, that's kind of how you do that.
Yeah.
But the trade-off, of course, is you're going to use a lot of pesticides.
Exactly. And you
Because
were talking
it's sort of like, in medicine where, you apply a lot of antiseptics to try to keep bacteria out of a surgical room or something like that. When we embrace an organic production system, we lose that capability. Or, it's not so much that we lose it, it's just counter to the whole concept and process of the way the system works. It's really more about embracing that complexity and the fact that, okay, we're trying to grow this crop, there are other things that want to eat this crop, so we want to make sure that there are even, more other things that like to eat the things that are going to eat our crop.
Exactly. You were talking about synthetic pesticides, which are used in conventional agricultural practices. And when people think of organic, we've mentioned this a little bit before in our podcast series, when people think of organic, they think that means no pesticides whatsoever. So I just wanted to open up for discussion about natural pesticides and non-synthetic pesticides and what that means for organic agriculture, how effective are they, and some of the practices that productions use for non-synthetic pesticides.
So, I could talk for hours about why pesticides are such a major part of so many of our agricultural systems, and there's a very good ecological reasoning for why they are an important tool in so many production systems. The big difference in organics is that, so in a conventional sense, we typically, if we just talk about insects, for instance, we're using things largely derived from petrochemicals, and they tend to be neurotoxins, meaning they interact with the nervous system of the target, most generally. They tend to have very broad activity, which from a production standpoint, if you're trying to keep all the insects out of your system,
it works.
That's a good fit for the tool, right? Philosophically, you may have other feelings about that, but just from a production standpoint, when we get into organics, because we typically use things that are either directly living. So a great example is Bacillus thuringiensis, which is a living bacteria in our ag production systems. Mostly it's used to manage caterpillar pests. This is a bacterium that when the caterpillar eats it, it basically causes their gut to fail, and yeah, it's kind of like they die of sepsis. It's kind of horrifying, actually, but
it's a non-synthetic
but it's actually
method.
a living organism, and it is targeted. So Bacillus thuringiensis will only affect some groups of caterpillars. It won't kill the beneficials, like that ladybird beetle.
That's really interesting.
But it also won't give you control over, say, like someone brought up, two-spotted spider mite. It's not going to it's not going to make a lick of difference on that herbivore population.
It'll only affect certain caterpillar populations.
And so when we look at organic, pesticides and organics, they tend to be much more targeted. We don't have many examples of broad spectrum insecticides that are going to affect, the overall system. And so it becomes more of a puzzle in fitting it together. Exactly. Of course, from a production standpoint, I mean, gets challenging, because whereas in a conventional production system, I might be able to rely on one or two products to provide me with a full spectrum of management. In a typical organic management system, I may need if I'm using some natural pesticides, I may need 3 or 4 different ones to target different parts of the system. And then I'm also trying to build in, the more natural biological control from predators and parasitoids. And it gets, it gets tricky. So did that address your question pretty well?
I think that it's really interesting that the non-synthetic pesticides, or like the living biocontrol methods that are used for organic production, are so specific and targeted, because when we're thinking about beneficial bugs from the organic lens, that's also really helpful for the industry. I wanted to pass the discussion over to David and ask if there were from a marketing standpoint, if consumers are ever concerned at all about the use of non-synthetic pesticides in organics, and if there's any clarification for that from the marketing standpoint.
Yeah, I think just to add to the conversation, looking at conventional versus organic farming, it's a completely different philosophy and approach. With conventional farming, it is almost like sterilizing the field and sterilizing the ground. So it's a matter of going in there and making sure that everything is pretty much dead, that we don't have anything living in the soil, and then we're able to treat the soil, in that case, with fertilizer, with synthetic fertilizer, but we can get out all the nematodes and other types of pests in the soil, so we have this clean, almost sterile soil to work with. And then from there, we're able to plant the crops, and then we can also treat the crops as it goes forward. And you were asking a bit about cost. The cost of treating conventional fields with these pesticides and also herbicides as well, because weeding is a very significant cost. It's probably about a quarter of the cost of what's required within organic farming, and is probably about 4 times more effective than what we're able to do in organic farming as well. So with organic farming, it is really looking at the field and the soil as an overall living system, and not so much of let's clear everything out there, but let's figure out how to work with the soil and how to work with the land, and actually go in and enrich the soil over time. So, at Cal Organic Farms, our organic wing, we are adding compost and working to enrich the soil, not so much for the crop that we're going to be growing most immediately, but to ensure the health of the soil 5 to 10 years down the road, and to continue building up that soil. And the same thing goes for building in the beneficial pests, and also the crop rotation that we do as well is critical to make sure that we're not going to enable a particular pest to become endemic in the field as well. So, organic farming, it really is a whole overall system, and it's a long-term system. It takes a lot of time. It takes a significant amount of effort. And, what I've noticed over just the years with organic produce is that, we go back 25 or 30 years, and you looked at organic product, and you could clearly distinguish what was an organic product to what was a conventional product. Didn't look as good, it was smaller, plants just didn't look quite as vigorous as what we saw for a conventionally grown product. And today, I look at our Cal Organic Farms product, and I go to the store and I find that the organic product looks better. It looks better and bigger and fresher than what we see with a lot of the conventional products. So, a lot of the care that goes into organic farming, it is the care that takes years and years to develop that soil and to get the right mix of everything that's required in the field to come up with not only just an organic product, but what I believe now is even a premium product to a lot of the conventional vegetables that are out there.
Mm-hmm. I agree completely with what you said. I think that organics is definitely a long-term game. And just creating that balance between the ecosystem and the rhizosphere in the soil and all of the critters that live in and around organic production. It's a very fine balance, and I think that organics they can manage that really well, and that they can incorporate that into their marketing standpoint and just their production practices as a whole. I wanted to change the discussion a little bit. We talked about some of the beneficial bugs, but now we're going to be switching it over to some of the non-beneficial bugs or disastrous bugs in the agriculture industry and in organics. I think that the biggest maybe threat would be aphids in vegetable production, possibly. There's also, let's see, the top invasive bugs from around the globe include the Asian citrus psyllid, the Asian longhorned beetle, the coconut rhinoceros beetle, the emerald ash borer beetle, and the European cherry fruit fly. Could you talk about those a little bit?
So one of the things that I think is really important to recognize when you start thinking about pests and pest management is that there are very much general pests. And so aphids, I would say, they're a great example.
Pest.
I mean, there are many species of aphids, and there are certain aphids that feed on, so like there's potato aphids and green peach aphids and cabbage aphids and lettuce aphids and, soybean aphids.
Gosh, aphids are everywhere.
Yeah,
they are everywhere.
However, they have a very sort of general way of feeding, and many of them, like green peach aphid, you don't find it on peach that much. It is a major vegetable aphid. Potato aphid feeds on all kinds of critters. Mm-hmm. And then you have insects that are much more specialized towards particular crops.
Definitely.
And so, some of the ones that you brought up, like Asian citrus psyllid, not going to be a problem in lettuce production or cabbage production.
Well, it only affects citrus.
Right, exactly. And the real issue with that one, for instance, is that
it's an invasive species.
It's an invasive species, but it has a relationship with there's a disease called Hualangbing. And so this is citrus greening disease, and it's I believe it's a phytoplasma that it's sort of like malaria, right? Mm-hmm. So mosquitoes transmit malaria from human to human. Asian citrus psyllid transmits Hualangbing from citrus tree to citrus tree. Once the tree gets sick, you can't really treat it, and you lose your tree. Another real important invasive in the fruit industry that we're dealing with is spotted wing Drosophila, and that's it's like the fruit fly that folks at home would find around softening and maybe decomposing fruit in their fruit bowl. Only it has a chainsaw on its butt, which allows it to so whereas like those vinegar flies that you find around your fruit bowl, they can only attack the fruit once it's soft. Once there's a point of entry, they'll lay their eggs in their
And this bug has a means of opening.
So it will lay its egg directly in a blueberry or raspberry, or we're starting to maybe see a little bit in some of the thin-skinned stone fruit, like thin-skinned plums and things. But in the vegetable world, I'd say, from a California perspective, some of the big critters are always aphids, of course. Mm-hmm. We do have mites. In lettuce production, increasingly, especially in the Salinas Valley, we have western flower thrips, which kind of like the Asian citrus psyllid. The insect itself is not the problem. The problem
it's the disease it transmits. It
transmits impatiens necrotic spot virus, or INSV. And that's why, for instance, this year, I was seeing reports from Canada, who really relies on California vegetable production. I think heads of romaine were going for about $6 a head.
Oh my
conventional.
Goodness.
Because of the virus.
I was out in Salinas standing in fields that could not be harvested, basically total collapse because of INSV.
And that definitely would have an impact on the producers if they can't produce their crop because it has a virus.
It's horrible because and I think David spoke towards this. You spend all the time and energy, you have all kinds of labor and fertility, and you have that long-term fertility program, and you have this crop, and then you can't sell it. Mm-hmm. Because there's nothing to harvest, because it can't be marketed, or it's literally collapsed.
Yeah.
So another couple of big critters for California vegetable industry, there's an invasive insect called the Bagrata bug, which was really a massive problem 7-10 years ago and has become more of a sporadic one. It's actually from Africa. It feeds on coal crops, so brassicas, cabbage, broccoli, and the like.
Yeah.
One that we're really battling now, and we're seeing more and more problems across the state, is diamondback moth. That's a specialist caterpillar that feeds on, again, brassicas, so broccly, cabbage, things like that.
Which is a big plant family, so it has a wide
exactly.
range of.
So those are some really big problems. Diamondback moth and western flower thrips both. One of the issues that we face, and we're seeing a lot of impacts in the conventional space, is they are superstars at developing resistance to insecticides, whether they're conventional or organic.
So yeah, I've heard about this.
Yeah, so right now with diamondback moth, what we're seeing is a lot of conventional growers are moving really to Bacillus thuringiensis, which I mentioned earlier, because that's the only thing left that actually pesticide that will manage it. Unfortunately, there are lots of examples of diamondback moth, which is a worldwide insect, developing resistance to Bacillus thuringiensis, or BT, as well as these others. So, we're kind of standing at the precipice with that one, and it's sort of like, well, are we going to have any, what are our management tools going to be left, or are we going to have to really entirely focus on biocontrol, which of course doesn't work as fast and is going to result in more beneficial insects on produce going out.
Which some people might find a bug in their food, and we're going to get into this video a little bit, but some people aren't too fazed by having bugs show up in their produce.
What am I leaving out? So nematodes, which David brought up. So, I mean, David, you prefaced by saying that you're mostly a marketing person, but I thought you did an awesome job talking about some of those broad agronomic realities. So nematodes are unsegmented roundworms. They live in the soil. They're one of Earth's oldest multicellular organisms. They've been around for somewhere around 1 billion years. And plant parasitic nematodes infect crop roots for the most part. And so in carrots and root crops, they're a major concern. And crop rotation is really the way that we largely get away from things like nematodes and soil-borne like fungal diseases and things. Basically, if you grow carrots, for example, if you grow carrots in the same field over and over and over again, you're creating an environment that's very favorable to soil critters like nematodes that feed on carrots. If you start rotations, which David brought up, and you start, say, okay, I'm going to have carrots this year, and then I'm maybe going to have a lettuce followed by a broccoli or a cabbage or something, and then maybe I'll do a tomato. By the time you get back to carrots, those populations of the nematodes that like to eat carrots are going to be very low. So you kind of get to reset the cycle every time.
And that's one of the good would you say that's one of the good production practices that organics?
I mean, if you don't rotate, then
you'd get a monoculture
and cannot grow organically without a solid rotational plan.
And this is why Grimmway Farms has Cal Organic Farms for organic vegetables. Because that are our carrot company. So to grow organic carrots, we know that we can only plant these carrots in the field once every 3 years. So we purchased Cal Organic Farms in 2001. So they had the expertise of growing these other organic vegetables. So we could start rotating these crops into our carrot fields, and we're able to control this ground every year. So the ground that we control, we have more than 50,000 acres that we're growing on organically, and we'll grow the carrots there. But once we grow the carrots, those carrots won't show up in the field until 3 years later.
Exactly. Yeah. Does Grimmway use any sort of cover crops in organics along with the rotation to help combat different critters that might be living in the soil and just overall soil health?
Yes, it's all part of a very complex crop rotation program. We do more than 1,000 plantings a year, throughout the year, and every field is planned out for pretty much years in advance to figure out what's going to be growing where. And this gives us the ability both to manage the fields and also make sure that we manage our supply of product that we have to sell.
Definitely a lot of management and planning that goes into this that
It's
maybe consumers don't know a whole lot about.
It's complexity. I think, that's, again, I keep coming back to David's factory comment, but I think that's really at the core. If there's one thing one of the things I'd really love for consumers to understand about organic agriculture is that, conventional agriculture is really based around a philosophy of simplification.
Exactly.
You're trying to simplify things down to their most basic elements, and then you're going to produce a very simple crop. In organics, it's the opposite. It's like, well, no, we're going to embrace complexity.
Exactly.
We're going to embrace the fact that we can't grow carrots every single year on this ground. We're only going to be able to do it every 3 years. So now we have to think about what are we going to grow on those other 2 years. We're going to embrace the fact that we can't just apply a broad spectrum neurotoxin. So instead, we're going to use a combination of natural products as well as really trying to foster a biological system that's going to manage these things for us. But of course, a complex system is going to sort of manifest interesting behaviors. But I think also to David's point, one of the incredible things we've seen as producers have moved towards organic production practices and they've made those long-term investments in their soil, we see improved quality and in a lot of our crops because, these plants didn't evolve in a factory. They evolved outdoors, interacting with all kinds of other organisms.
Definitely, and especially bugs.
Right. So that complexity, really benefits the crops that we're trying to grow, and then hopefully the folks who eat it, hopefully they're getting a better product.
Yeah, we do have another video that was produced by Tegan and her groupmate Melissa, going around and asking students on campus what they would do if they found a bug in their organic produce. So let's go take a look at that.
Hello everyone. We're going to be asking everyone or people about what they would do if they found a bug in their food this morning. What would you do if you found a bug in your organic produce?
I would be stoked because then I knew it was organic produce.
Cool. Thank you.
I'd pick it out.
I would be fine with it.
Lick it off?
Yeah.
Wash my fruits a little bit harder
Eat
next
it for
time.
some protein.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
I'd probably I'd throw away the produce that the bug was on, but I'd wash the rest.
Okay.
That's what I'd do.
Cool, thank you.
I would probably pick it out. Yeah.
Thank you.
Bug in my organic produce. Probably take it out. I think I'd probably still eat it. Yeah.
Cool, thank
you.
Produce.
Oh, well, I have found a bug in my organic produce.
What did you do?
I took it outside.
Took it outside?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I wouldn't kill it.
Okay.
Is that what?
In my organic produce, probably leave it alone. I guess.
Okay, cool.
It's
thank
probably
you.
there for a reason. So.
All right.
Right, thank
you.
I don't know. Probably kill it.
Kill it. Cool. Thank you.
I'd probably throw it away. I'd probably take the bug out and then eat the produce.
Thank you guys. Organic produce.
Ooh. I if it was like a fruit fly or like a worm, I guess how. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a worm in my organic food. I feel like that's kind of expected. I would clean it out and remove it and kind of check over it. But I would kind of probably keep eating my food. I would just clean it out. Yeah,
awesome.
no. Yeah.
Thank you. Found a bug in your organic produce.
I would likely pick it off and put it to the side.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good.
Eat it.
Eat it.
Whoa.
We had a lot of different interactions with people. We were super expecting people to be like, oh, ew, no. But I feel like we had a pretty good variation of people that were like, oh, well, if it's organic, we would, the first guy who actually is construction in the building next door, he was like, no, I would hope there would be so that it's not being grown conventionally.
Was he your chronologically first person that you asked?
No,
okay,
no.
Okay.
I think it's really interesting that the responses that we got towards this question, and the fact that it is organic produce, and that kind of raises the question: do consumers have different attitudes towards finding bugs in their food since it is an organic product, and they have maybe a conception that organic is tied closer to the land and the ecological practices in place would more likely find a bug in your food as compared to conventional products. So I just think it was really interesting that the attitudes were a lot more positive towards finding a bug in your food.
Well, that's, I think, a great question to ask our guest star
Yeah.
today. So David, since, I mean, Grimmway does market both conventional and organic products, do you have an experience with that in terms of the Cal Organic side versus the conventional Grimmway carrot side in terms of consumer complaints or in terms of consumer comments?
I would have to actually look. I know on the time I spent on that desk and actually speaking directly to consumers, we do get complaints of insects that's in product. A lot of times these are products that are in the bag, so I know when in their bag, they actually could be organic or conventionally grown. I'm not sure, because most of the organic products, most of the organic vegetables that we're selling, they're bulk, so they're, it would not be in a bag. We do have some overwrap product that it could possibly show up on. But, customers will notice this though. So, on our side, we have the shopper, the consumer side, but there's also the customer side as well.
So by customer, you mean like the produce buyer? So the
produce
buying
buyers, the retailers,
right.
When the product is shipped to the customer, everything undergoes an inspection.
Mm-hmm.
So there are very strict tolerances as far as what they can find for defects, including insects as well. And if the product doesn't meet the standard, the product is going to be rejected. And, there's probably a little bit more leeway that's given to organic products. Should be. But, not always. I mean, It just depends on the customer.
I have a question for you, David. So we're an agricultural communications class. I'm trying to teach my students that all methods of agricultural communications are applicable, and all sectors of the agricultural industry needs its due. So how can we as an agricultural communications class help you message better for consumers to understand bugs on your food is actually part of the process? How can we help you do that?
I think this communication, that we're having right now, this discussion that we're having right now is very helpful. Most consumers, most shoppers, I think, are very disconnected of where their food comes from and how their food actually comes to be. And I think in their head, they have that factory sterilized model and don't realize everything grows in the ground. So everything grows in the ground. And, in that process, particularly with organics, by design, it is a symbiotic system that relies upon adding a very complex biological structure to the soil and really having those fields be alive with all types of life in order to foster this type of growth and give us the quality produce that we're looking for without using the synthetic pesticides and synthetic fertilizers. So this type of education, helping consumers understand where their food comes from, even on conventionally produced products like carrots, for instance. So consumers understand that the carrots are actually grown in the ground, and to understand how that process works and that it takes time. I think most people don't even understand how much time it takes to grow a carrot. The carrots that you buy, if you buy carrots in a bag or cello carrots, they're in the ground for 5 to 6 months. So it's a very long process. And the longer that product is in the ground, the more water, the more fertilizer, the more pesticides that they require. And then also, it's also more time for something to happen. So, and be it a weather event or an insect event or water unavailability, whatever the case may be. So farming is a very difficult business, and God bless our farmers, because it's very difficult, and there's just so many things that can happen within the time span that it takes to actually grow and produce a product, particularly when you're looking at something like a carrot or a potato or onions that take longer and they're growing under the ground.
So before I pass it back to Natalie to wrap it up, I'd just like to say thank you for coming on, and hopefully we can collaborate some more with other classes and maybe doing some messaging things that you might be able to support. Just throwing that out there. because we would enjoy working with industry a little bit more to get the messaging across to the audience. So Natalie, take it away.
Yeah, most definitely. That sounds really interesting and hopeful for the future, especially with communication projects like this. Well, we're just wrapping up our bugging episode. I've learned a lot about beneficial bugs. I don't know about the rest of the panel, but I learned definitely a lot about beneficial bugs and their role in organic agriculture and even the consumer attitude towards those bugs. So I just want to say thank you to the panelists. Thank you, Dr. Grisham, Dr. Mike, and Tegan for giving your expertise and helping sit on the podcast today. So I won't bug you any longer about this episode. So we're just gonna wrap this up. Thank you again, David Bright, for sitting in today and providing your expertise. It's been really helpful, and it's been a great conversation. Yeah, of course. Well, that is our episode for today. This has been Live in 225, and this is your podcast host, Natalie Victorine, signing off.
All right.
Live in 225 is a production of the AGC 225 class at Cal Poly called Digital Communications in Agriculture. Program funding was provided by the California Certified Organic Farmers Foundation and the Transition to Organic Partnership Program. Our production team for this episode was Tegan Ellers and Melissa Frago. Our director for Season 1 was Bella Anushian. Our host was Natalie Victorine. The executive producer, creator, and co-editor for the show was Moses Mike. Matt Griesop was our co-producer. The student panelist was Tegan Ellers. Our special guest was David Bright from Grimmway Farms. Our audio technician was Melissa Frago, who was also our managing editor. The video switching director was Cole Stevens. Our vocal talent was Jared Mandrell. Background music by LVY Music from Pixabay. Intro and outro music by Alex Grohl from Pixabay. Thanks for joining us.